Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Louisville Police Chief is suspended after the news drops a very interesting audio recording of the promotion of one of the department's majors to lieutenant colonel. While the audio recording is revealing, it also points to how DEI and Black Lives Matter promoted police initiatives and individuals are destroying the police department while not actually dealing with the real systematic issues that need to be addressed if the people of Louisville want to have a safe and secure city. And I will, hopefully, actually finish talking about the op-ed in the Herald-Leader that I started on yesterday about the LGBTQ cause to ban conversion therapy. And finally, I hope I will go over my comment section from this week to just go over exactly how I upset the internets, how they got mad at me this week. One user did call me the most insufferable person on Twitter right now, so that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited about that. That's a mantle I will hold. But before we dig down into it, please head on over to theandrewshow.com, hit the contact tab if you want to reach out to the show. If you're listening on any platforms, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you leave a review, make sure you tell others about it. If you're listening on the radio, thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure you tune in every day on WZXI, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And obviously, if you're new to the show, welcome. I appreciate you tuning in for the first time. I am seeing a few new listeners every single day signing in. We're seeing pretty good growth in our listening audience. So please make sure you're sharing this with others and help keep that going. It keeps me going, keeps me excited, putting out good content. When I see that there's more and more people listening, it gives me that motivation to know that, oh, this maybe is making a difference by offering the kind of commentary and news that you're not going to find anywhere else. Now, without further ado, let's get down into it.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?
That's right, bad boys, what you gonna do? Except this time the bad boys are possibly the police department police chief, who's actually a woman. So I guess bad girls. So the Louisville Police, Metro Police Department there, chief was suspended this week. Basically, what was happened was the news was going to drop an audio recording of the chief in a meeting. I'll play for you some of that recording here in a second. And so the news reached out. They sent an email over to the station saying, hey, we're going to release this audio recording. Would you like to comment on the story before we release it? You have like 2 days. And the police and decided Greenberg apparently came out just like an hour or so later announcing the police chief will be suspended and there'll be an investigation because of that audio recording. Before I exactly say kind of what's happening and kind of the background of this, I think it's best we listen to the news story that has the recording in it. So obviously the recording was obtained by Wave 3, so we're going to go ahead and listen to their news report on this. Let's take a listen here.
Don't put it on record. Get at it. And I'm going to ask, is there anybody within this command staff and executive staff you can't work with?
The chief proceeds to call on her majors one by one by name until she gets to Major Shannon Lauder of the downtown's 1st Division.
Shannon.
Sorry, I'm trying to unplug my volume. Yeah, ma'am, I cannot work with Major Kurger. He has sexually harassed me and attacked me, and I cannot work with him.
There is silence for 21 seconds before the chief continues calling on the remaining majors. Exactly 59 seconds after Lauder makes that accusation against Kruger, the chief announces his promotion to the top of her command staff.
Your next lieutenant colonel will be Brian Kruger.
The chief calls on a few more majors and then continues.
Major Lauder, I've heard your concerns, and I understand that you cannot, and so we have to visit on the status moving forward.
Yes, ma'am. I know now's not a good time to bring it up, but I didn't want you to say that, later that I didn't bring it up. So sorry I had to come out in this way.
That we've got to keep moving the department forward, but I've heard your concern. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So to explain, kind of wrap that up for you too, in case you missed it or don't understand, the chief here is about to promote a Major Kruger. I think it's how you say it's Kruger. It's spelled kind of different. We'll say Krieger to Lieutenant Kruger. I think I'll go Kruger. Kruger to Lieutenant Colonel, and Kruger, who by the way is in charge of internal investigations, important to know for the story. And a part of that promotion, I guess, was the chief was going around to ask if there was any reasons why anyone who could not work with him, if she promoted him, he would be over them. Is there any reasons you can't work with him and why? And a female major says, well, by the way, he sexually harassed and sexually attacked me. So there's that. The chief then follows that up by being silent for a full 21 seconds, they say, and then just continues on and promotes Krieger anyways, and seems to be upset at the female major for bringing it up in the first place. Now, I understand the idea that normally, you would want to say, look, let's see about dealing with this behind closed doors, and, why didn't she report this before? However, let's look at the situation. Who would you report it to if you were her? I would assume people who work for, or Krieger himself, after all, he's in charge of internal investigations. And so if there's an internal investigation to be had about sexual misconduct, you think that'd probably fall under his department. I could be wrong, but I would assume so. So I can understand why she may not have said anything before, but also the chief literally asked the question. If you cannot work with him, and why is that? If you didn't want an honest answer to the question, don't ask. And this shows also incompetence as far as leadership goes, because any good leader, before you ask a public question about something so important, you should have gone to each of the majors and asked them what their answers would be beforehand. Now, this comes out as the Louisville Police Department is just mired in huge, big problems. Problems that the Chief Jacqueline here was supposed to deal with. Remember, she's pretty newly hired. She's only, I think, about a year, 2 years old at the most. However, instead of dealing with root causes, which I can say is a mix of incompetence and policymaking and leadership in the command, coupled with a lack of adequate resources for the way to deal with, not to mention a general environment of malice from the public and also a judicial system that isn't addressing the issues, instead of dealing with that, it seems to be just getting worse. I mean, let's look at all that they're dealing with just over the past few months. First, they're still under federal investigation for use of force incidences. Obviously, the Breonna Taylor incident came out, and that kind of put him under scrutiny. So obviously, a Biden DOJ coming in would take things more seriously, but they're digging into all kinds of use of force instances. And I'm not going to say I agree with that federal investigation, as I've pointed out in prior episodes when I dug into what that investigation is going through in the consent decree and what they're finding that's so wrong. Oftentimes, I found myself disagreeing with the federal investigators' decision to go ahead and mark those as bad use of force situations. So I'm not saying I agree with it, but they are under federal investigation. That's just a fact. Then you have the no pursuit policy that state legislators are now looking into, calling them up to have a hearing on. A policy that says if a person literally just drives away from any crime other than a violent felony, they won't pursue them. So if you want to get away with a crime in Louisville, apparently you just drive away. If it's anything other than violently murdering somebody, if you just drive away, you'll be fine. They'll not chase after you. And it's a policy, by the way, that Lexington has as well, but it hasn't become as much of an issue because Lexington is more lax on the exigent circumstances rider that they have on their policy. They're more likely to give pursuit than Louisville is and allow that to happen when they request it. At least that's what I've heard. And so the policy from Louisville has resulted in many frustrated residents who say people are just breaking into their homes and just getting away from it. But this isn't all the problems they've had. They've, of course, had the Scotty Scheffler arrest in Louisville. Prosecutor office has dropped charges on that. All the evidence shows that Scotty Scheffler really didn't do anything wrong, and they acted wrongly. And there's all kinds of other issues. We'll continue to go over what those issues are and what's causing it after this short break. You're listening to The Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back with The Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, we were talking about issues going on in the Louisville Metro Police Department as the chief has been suspended for the way that she handled a sexual harassment claim, something we played the audio for you last segment here. We're just kind of going over the issues that the Louisville Police Department is going through on top of that. And we have obviously the federal investigation for uses of force. We have the state now having them come into hearings on their policy of non-pursuit on crimes, where if you just drive away from a crime, you'll get away with it in Louisville. And now also we have to mention the handling of suspects in general. There was some questionable issues regarding one officer shooting a man in the head as he's kind of being held down by other officers. Now, of course, there's some circumstances around that, but, not responding to crimes in general. I mean, the list goes on and on. And what is this all caused by? Well, I think there's a couple things here. First, you have incompetence in command. It would truly seem that the Louisville Police Department has a completely incompetent command structure, and because they're focusing on all the wrong issues. However, the command focus is largely set up by politics. So they're going to focus on the things that kind of politics is pushing them to, instead of focusing on actually dealing with the crime. I mean, obviously the Breonna Taylor incident has made it even more politically charged, and it meant politically there had to be big changes at the police. But nobody wanted to talk about the real reason why this happens. You see, while Black Lives Matter is marching in the street and while politicians were scrambling, nobody bothered to ask the question of why were we doing no-knock warrants in the first place? I can tell you, I have many family members involved with law enforcement, several of them actually in the FBI even. And I've asked them, does the FBI do no-knock warrants? And they told me, now this was a few years ago when the Breonna Taylor incident was first happening, so I don't know if their policies have changed. I haven't asked them since then, but I'm assuming they're still the same. They say, no. We don't do no-knock warrants. We knock loud and proud. We show up with a lot of officers covering it because we're not worried about them flushing evidence. We're not worried about them doing anything other than getting away. So showing up with as many FBI agents as possible. And obviously when you show up with 50, 60 agents versus 2, 3 cops, you're more likely to de-escalate the situation because people are like, well, I'm definitely not going to make it out of this alive if I try something. Compared to if it's a few officers, they say, yeah, I could try my luck here. On top of that, we should be asking about no-knock warrants because it puts police in a position. Longtime listeners have heard me say this time and time again. I back the blue. I back our police officers. So that means I do not want them to be in circumstances where they can be legally shot and killed while doing their quote-unquote job. And under no-knock warrants, time and time again, all across the country, we've seen people who've had no-knock warrants executed on their homes that resulted in them shooting at police officers or shooting at police officers or even shooting and killing police officers, getting off without being convicted of anything to do there because they say, well, look, you no-knocked into their home. They defended themselves. They responded in the exact same way anybody would in that situation, and that's accurate. In a country where we have the Second Amendment, you cannot do no-knock warrants. And you can hate me all you want to for saying it, but I am against police policies that put police in a position to be killed, to be shot and killed while executing search warrants and it to be legal. I don't like that. And I also don't like to put police officers in positions where they're not respecting our rights. But even outside of those policies, it's clear that the chief here, Chief Jacqueline, absolutely didn't execute her command properly in this situation. I mean, she should have gone to each of the majors privately. I mentioned this before. She should have gone to each of the majors privately and asked them this question before she publicly asked them, is there any reasons why you can't work with Major Kruger when I promote him to lieutenant colonel? Is there any reason you can't do it? And if she had come to them privately, they would have said this. I'm going to assume they would have said, yeah, he sexually harassed, sexually assaulted me. That's a reason. Now, I know she didn't go to him beforehand because from the recording, if she had gone to them beforehand and asked, she would have said, why didn't you tell me about this when we spoke about this a few days ago? I came to you a few days ago and I asked this question to you privately, and you never told me anything about this. But she didn't do that. She never claimed she did that. Instead, she seemed annoyed that the major would dare even speak up, despite the fact she failed to execute her command properly in going to and handling this in a private situation before she asked the question publicly. And that points to an environment of a lack of focus on the important aspects of the job. That points to an environment where you don't have free and open communication with command. Instead, they're focused on their latest DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. Now, the chief here, I wouldn't say, is a DEI hire. I mean, she is obviously a female and she is black, so people could claim, well, it's just what happens, incompetence. I mean, her resume looks good. I mean, it's a major plus for the city for hiring her because, Democrats care about things like race and gender. But even take her race and gender out of it, she does have decades of experience at the Atlanta Police Department. She worked her way up, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, deputy chief. So it's not like that points to her being like some sort of unexperienced DEI hire. However, she is new, and the focus of the department has been DEI before her, and it probably will be after her because they won't learn their lesson. I mean, take a look at these are some headlines from the Louisville Police Department, and this comes from 2022, December 2022. It says, here's the headline: "We have diversity. Louisville Metro Police adds 26 new recruits to the force." So at this time, Louisville Police Department is down hundreds of officers, and they're adding 26 new recruits. And instead of saying, hey, we're growing, we're getting in more recruits, the chief at the time, Erica Shields, who was the interim chief, says, we have so many different nationalities, countries, we have diversity and gender. I think that it's going to take time to close the gap, but we're definitely getting a lot different minds. And I think that's what good policing takes. She doesn't care about how many officers they have. But she cares about the fact that, we hired 26 new ones and they're diverse. Yay for us. You also see another story here, this one from 2021. LMPD short 241 officers, chief hoping to add diversity to department. So instead of being focused on the fact we had to hire 241 officers, so anybody with a pulse that qualifies, that can be a good officer, let's just hire them because we're 241 short. Instead, they say, no. This is an opportunity for us to add diversity. I mean, let's while we're down officers, let's go ahead and hire based upon immutable characteristics like gender and race. That sounds like a great idea. So you have a public that, due to bad policy, like the no-knock warrants, doesn't like you. And yes, the media totally plays a part. But as I said, you had the policy in the first place. You have a city that doesn't fund you, so you can't get enough officers, but more importantly, you can't provide adequate training to make sure that officers aren't playing a telephone game to understand policies. You've got a department leadership that's more concerned about racial and gender hiring quotas than about policing and lowering crime through policing. And they certainly have run a communication problem with command. There's a big communication problem here. Clearly, they're understaffed. And let's throw on top of the fact that you're under investigation by the feds and the state. Plus, let's mention the judges right now in Louisville. I mean, good luck trying to get a judge to actually lock somebody up and put him in jail. I mean, may I remind you that on the same day Scotty Scheffler gets arrested, another guy who had been convicted of crimes dealing with murder and drugs and guns and has been charged with things like escape. For some reason, all in the past few years, for some reason was out of jail on an anklet. A person charged with escape, out of jail on an anklet, and he cut his anklet, according to the news. He cut his anklet, then picked up an AK-47, went into, or at least an AK, I don't know if it was an AK-47, AK-style rifle, went to a local supermarket, shot up the place, shot a woman in the leg, just wildly firing in the parking lot, stole a car, wrecked it on the tracks, then was walking down the middle of Louisville with his AK. They end up just back out on the street time after time again. You have the same repeat people doing the same violent, awful things that you just find yourself arresting over and over again. So let me ask you, what good officer would want to work there? I mean, you'd hope that good officers join to protect the community, protect our freedoms and rights, protect our constitutional rights, like the right to have property and free commerce. I mean, the only thing stopping a person when you're trying to do business with them from robbing you and shooting you in the face is the fact that they're concerned about being arrested and taken to jail. I mean, simple rights like property rights can't exist unless somebody's there to enforce them and make sure that even the smallest minority has their rights. And by the smallest minority, I mean the individual has their rights. You would hope that those are the officers we bring in, officers that see that they have a higher calling. But when you're treated like this, then on top of that are unable to accomplish anything of note or value, what higher calling officer stays and risks their lives here at a department like this, a department like Louisville Metro Police Department? So what do you end up with? You end up with a higher rate of bad, power-seeking petty officers who don't care about doing better, or maybe they did at one point care about doing better, but that's been beat out of them through the incompetence of their command staff, the awful judicial system, the public's general dislike of them, and so they end up just, it's a job. What else am I going to do? And if Mayor Greenberg doesn't realize what's going on here, that you have this cycle of behavior that's causing bigger and bigger issues, if Mayor Greenberg doesn't turn it around, it's only going to get worse. But for him to turn around, he has to recognize it. He has to see that, the problem here is we're focusing on all the wrong things. Instead of letting the police, the judges execute the judicial system properly without letting people back out. And we get back to a law and order type mindset to at least deal with creating safer communities for our residents. Until he recognizes that, it ain't going to get better. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think he ever will recognize it. Well, coming up after this, we'll talk about the conversion therapy op-ed I didn't get a chance to go over yesterday. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So yesterday, I started talking about an op-ed I saw in the Herald-Leader called "No Kentuckian Should Have to Suffer Through Conversion Therapy Like I Did." And I mentioned that there's been a push in our legislature, and there's actually a group kind of set up and set out to do this, to ban quote-unquote conversion therapy. And I think it's important that you understand what a ban on conversion therapy is. Because when I say conversion therapy or beat the gay out of you kind of thing, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about physical violence. We're not talking about any of that. And I think it's important and to exemplify what they mean by conversion therapy, what they want a law passed to stop providers from being able to do, and apparently in this, churches as well. You have to understand what they call conversion therapy. And so this wrote by one Brandon Long. He says, "My name is Brandon Long, and I'm a survivor of conversion therapy. I first became aware of my sexuality around the same time that Matthew Shepard was killed for being gay, and that terrified me. I vowed that I would keep my own identity secret, buried deep inside. I did not want to be murdered simply because of who I was." And so Matthew Shepard, by the way, just real quick, was somebody that was killed in 1998. So he says, "Eventually, I did muster up the courage to share my sexuality and was in a place where I felt confident and loved at church. I was sure that God would love me no matter what. Each church I attended has offered different solutions to fix me. The Pentecostal church attempted deliverance, claiming to cast out demons. The Charismatic church focused on inner healing, placing blame on my parents, urging me to marry. The Baptist church subjected me to conversion therapy, biblical counseling, and accountability groups to make a man out of me. Ultimately, I was kicked out." So already off the bat, he's claiming that different solutions to quote-unquote fix me. And he's rejecting kind of the Christian teaching here. So, any kind of problem you have, anything that's viewed as a sin by Christianity, and I'm a Christian, and homosexuality to a Christian is a sin. If you're a biblical following Christian, it is a sin. This doesn't mean you're not accepted into a church as a sinner. It doesn't mean God doesn't love you. It doesn't mean Jesus doesn't love you. It doesn't even mean the church hates you. What it means is you come into the church and you're sinning. And the entire job of the church is to help stop us from sinning. Sure, we have deliverance from God through his son, Jesus, our Savior. But that doesn't mean that you can just still sin willy-nilly. If you want to live a blessed life, to at least attempt to not sin, repent of your sins, and actively try to do better to not do that anymore. Make a better person out of you. And so obviously the solution, quote unquote, to fix you would be the same thing they'd want to do for somebody who comes in and says they're an adulterer. They're addicted to pornography. They're addicted to alcohol. They're addicted to drugs. Any kind of other sin that they're drawn into. And keep in mind, putting anything before God is a sin. So anything along those lines, they're going to try to fix. So it's not surprising to me that he went in and he got that kind of counseling. But remember, that's what he called conversion therapy. Goes on to say, this now back from the article, the most recent attempt to fix me occurred in 2019 at the hands of a licensed professional counselor in Northern Kentucky who believed reestablishing a healthy and secure bond between my parent and myself would cure my sexuality. Though all these efforts to change my sexuality looked different, they were all forms of so-called conversion therapy. Conversion therapy refers to a wide range of dangerous and discredited practices that aim to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. And these practices are condemned by every major medical and mental health association across the United States. When I refused to endure conversion therapy any longer, my church rejected me. So did many of my family members and friends. When he says rejected, because understand, he's saying this is what conversion therapy is. He talks about in 2019. They said, you know what? You think you're gay, but possibly you're not. This could be the result of some other psychological condition going on. And if you just think logically for a second, it is not normal to be gay. That can't be normal. And we know it can't be normal because literally the continuation of our species requires us not to be gay. You have to be straight, like to continue the species, even if you don't believe in God, if you just believe in nature, right? So let's say you're somebody who disagrees with God's word. So God's word saying, hey, it's a sin to be gay. You say, no, I don't believe that. Okay, let's go over to science then. The sole purpose of DNA, the sole purpose of a species, according to science, is to continue that species. According to evolution, if you believe that, is to continue that species. They've evolved to continue the species on, to adapt to their environment and survive as a species. Where would that evolving have involved bringing on the idea that you're gay, that being gay is actively a thing that doesn't continue the species? So being gay isn't normal. Whether you think that I was born this way, or you think people are born that way, or what have you, it's perfectly reasonable, in my humble opinion, that a therapist, a church, anybody, when they're talking to somebody who says, yes, I'm gay, can think to themselves, I don't know if you're like actually gay. Maybe you're bisexual or something. I don't know if you're actually gay or if this is the result of something else. And you see that too in the stats because you've seen more and more people coming out as quote unquote gay, LGBTQ, a part of the youth. LGBTQ youth is massively exploding. And you just wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that if society right now wasn't saying, hey, what's your sexuality? Are you straight or are you gay? Where people are like, maybe I got to think about that. Like if they weren't asking that question, the default would be, if they were just like the default being straight, I don't think there'd be nearly that many people who are identifying as gay, and you can disagree with me and I think you're wrong. So obviously the response of, is this being caused by something else, is what they believe is conversion therapy. And this backs up in science too, and I mentioned this yesterday, but you see a high rate of LGBTQ behavior in identical twins, specifically by one identical twin versus the other one not having that issue. And clearly, there's a lot of identity issues going on in identical twins, where one twin, the other twin, they're both trying to stand out from each other. So you could see that there would be psychological conditions like, well, that twin's straight, my identical brother's straight, so that must mean I want to be different than him. I want to be seen different as him, so I'll be gay. You could see that being a thought process based upon the data and the stats. And so it would be reasonable and scientific to study that and look into it. But of course, the LGBTQ mob does not want you looking into that at all. And then let's go into where he says, when I refused to endure conversion therapy any longer, my church rejected me, so did many of my family members and friends. What does he mean by rejected me? Does he mean that they wouldn't just accept that, well, he says that being gay is not a sin, and he says that he was just born that way, and he says there's nothing wrong with him. He says that we shouldn't try to convert him to being straight, that we just have to accept who he is and ignore the fact that we disagree with it. We just had to do that in order for him to say, accept me. I'm sure a lot of people rejected you. No church, no good church that follows the Bible is going to say, yeah, sure, being gay is fine. If you tried all this, I guess, if you tried conversion therapy, it didn't work, I guess it's fine. Of course not. Now, they're not going to, if by rejected, he means they kicked you out, full on, like, kicked you out the door. Maybe they would if you stop trying to sin. I could see a church saying that. Possibly. Like, look, if you're going to keep sinning like this, we don't know how to help you here. But family members and friends, did they reject you by saying, I don't want to be your friend anymore because you're gay? Or was it more so they just didn't buy into what you were telling yourself? They didn't agree with your viewpoint. And so now you say that they're rejecting. So we'll go ahead and finish out the rest of this after this short break and then go into the comments section. We'll have that coming up here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back here in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So for the break, I've been digging into this op-ed, Herald-Leader, no Kentuckian should have to suffer through conversion therapy like I did. An opinion piece by one Brandon Long. Kind of talked about some different parts of what he's calling conversion therapy, why he thinks it should be banned. It's not, nobody physically assaulted him for being gay, nothing like that, along those lines. But we pick back up now in the story here where after he says, when I refused to endure conversion therapy any longer, my church rejected me, so did many of my family members and friends. And talked about what I think he means by rejected. He goes on to say, I'm not sharing this to gain sympathy. I share this story to tell people that the dangers of conversion therapy are very much real in our communities and across our state. In fact, 21% of LGBTQ youth in Kentucky reported being threatened with or subjected to conversion therapy, according to data from the Trevor Project. Now, I want to pause here. Now, he laid this out, but he never once has said what the dangers of conversion therapy are. The dangers of, he says, there are dangers here. He'll go on to say, well, they just didn't accept me for me. But he never goes on to say exactly what physical dangers this is. He says it's dangerous to our community. Now, he does attempt to explain it in the following statement. He says, I just wanted to follow Jesus, but instead my faith has been hijacked by attempts to change me. Conversion therapy has made me feel isolated, depressed, and praying to die. Conversion therapy does not work. It only causes damage, and it must be made illegal. Understand. So he says, I want to follow Jesus, but because, I couldn't get a church to shape their beliefs around my beliefs, that made me upset. And so rather than responding by attempting to deal with his overall mental health issues that apparently are just caused by Christians existing, I mean, they're not knocking on his door trying to change him. He's walking into the church. And how dare the church try to change you? You know exactly what the church is supposed to do. Make you less of a sinner. He says, it must be made illegal. Understand what he laid out. What he laid out is essentially that churches, he wants to make it that churches should not be allowed to say to somebody, God didn't make you gay. They're not allowed to say to somebody, homosexuality is a sin, and you should work towards not committing that sin. He doesn't just say, I don't want to be around that, so I'm going to leave that alone. He demands that it be made illegal. This is the problem. This is what all these LGBTQ activists and things, they don't either understand, they ignore, or they choose just to kind of forget. They are not just asking to be tolerated. They're not even asking for us, quote unquote, not to hate them, whatever that means. I mean, we defined it in this. He lays out clearly what hate means to him, which is why he's having these issues. They don't just want to say, well, you know what, you live your life, I'll live mine, we'll leave each other alone. Sure, they take our tax dollars for this and that, but we'll just put that to the side. We'll just leave each other alone. That's not what they want. They literally want to make it illegal for you to not agree with their lifestyle. You're not saying you don't want to throw them in jail. Not saying you don't want anything else. They're talking about thought crimes. They want to make it illegal for you to think that what they're doing is a sin, to think that LGBTQ and homosexuality and everything else is not normal. And if you dare utter it, well, now you're engaging in conversion therapy, and they want to make that illegal. So turning now to the comments section, there's a few posts I made this week that upset people, and I'm not going to be able to get to every single one clearly. But there's one in particular which I felt a need to discuss. So I'd mentioned earlier in the week, and those of you who listened to the show heard me talk about it, where I talked about how Country Boy Brewing had decided to not just put up a pride flag or something, but decided to actually use their business during Pride Restaurant Week in order to create a product that people go in and purchase. They will donate money to Pride of Lexington. And I laid this out in a post too as well, about how they decided to get involved in Pride Restaurant Week. This is more than just saying, hey, happy month to LGBTQ people, or saying, hey, you're accepted here with some gay flag. This is actively using your business to fund a leftist political cause and politicians, because Lexington Pride does actively push for the election of individuals. And sure enough, every time I make a post about a private business doing something I disagree with, the response is, and this is one of the comments here, pretty sure they are a private company and have the freedom to support / not support whom / or whatever they want. Which is mind-blowing to me that I have to keep dealing with this statement. It's like a broken record. Because in the same breath that they're saying a private company can have the freedom to support and not support whomever they want to, they're commenting that to say that my post about not wanting to support a private business because of my reasons not to is wrong. So they hold a belief that a private business can do or support whatever they want to, which, by the way, I'm sure if that private business was supporting some things, they would have a lot more bigger issues with it. But on a post where I say that, their response always is to somehow say that, oh, I thought people had freedom of religion or freedom of thought or freedom of whatever. And it's just ridiculous. Yes, they do have that freedom. I'm not asking my government to do anything. At the same time, I'm using my freedoms to express why I don't want to support them. Now, another thing I said in the post, I made this point during my show, was that I believe some of the owners had conservative leanings, but clearly not if they're supporting, LGBTQ Pride Month. And there was some claims by people. Here's one of them. It's weird that you think supporting LGBT folks can't possibly be conservative. No wonder most of them don't vote for you. Realistically speaking, if you're the type of person that you believe in Pride Month and the LGBTQ parades and you're supporting and putting money into that, you can't possibly be conservative. You could be Republican, but you can't be conservative because, you're something else. You're actually probably more libertarian because you're fiscally conservative then, but socially liberal. So that'd make you libertarian, because a conservative, the key part of a conservative, what makes a conservative versus a libertarian, is having socially traditional views to go along with a belief in free enterprise. So you believe in free and open markets, but your personal beliefs and viewpoints are that of traditional social values. And traditional social values include a man and woman getting married and having kids. While you could be gay, I guess, and be conservative, it would require, though, for you to believe and recognize that a family, a man and woman getting together and having kids, is incredibly important, and a man and woman's relationship, because of its nature to have children, is of more value than your, quote-unquote, your gay relationships, because they can't result in children. And so straight relationships have more value to society than gay relationships do. You would kind of have that belief in order to be LGBTQ and conservative. And I tell you what, in all my time, I've never heard any LGBTQ person say that. Say that my relationships to society are not as valuable because I don't continue on the species. I don't create more kids. I don't create more people to, even from an economic standpoint, you need a constantly growing population to grow your economy. You just do. And so you don't contribute to that. So I recognize that from a governmental standpoint and even a societal standpoint, economic standpoint, that straight relationships, because they result in children, are of more value. I don't care if you say they're only slightly more value, whatever, but they are of more value than gay relationships. And so they should be celebrated and not put down upon, which is what happens. They get put down upon by the Pride Month, by the LGBTQ parades, those kinds of things, this constant call about everything's so heterosexual. In schools, they teach about heterosexual relationships, but not homosexual relationships. Those are claims. And of course, they're not teaching about relationships as much as they are teaching about, of course, the reproduction cycle of humans, and that involves heterosexual relationships. But if you can recognize that value, society, children, everything else, that men and women have that value, I guess you could be gay and a conservative, but I don't think that will come very close. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today and this week. See you back here on Monday. Have a great rest of your day.